In the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Senate, where representatives of over 3,000 species gathered to debate the fate of stars and civilizations, there had always been one seat that remained conspicuously vacant. Positioned between the delegates from Proxima Centauri and the ambassadors of the Tau Ceti Federation, the simple chair designated for Earth stood empty, gathering the cosmic equivalent of dust for nearly 12 centuries. "It is perhaps the most peculiar mystery in our political history," remarked historian Zyla Vemtkal, his 7 eyes blinking in a rhythmic pattern that indicated deep contemplation. The ancient Arcturan scholar's exoskeleton creaked as he settled more comfortably in the observation deck overlooking the Senate floor. His audience, a group of freshly graduated diplomatic attachés, leaned forward with anticipation. "But I thought humans were just primitive creatures who never achieved faster-than-light travel," chirped Tizik, the youngest of the group, her feathers ruffling with confusion. Historian Vemtekal emitted the Arcturan equivalent of a chuckle, a series of rapid clicks that echoed against the chamber's crystalline walls. "Oh, my dear child, that is precisely what they wanted everyone to believe." Below them, the Senate was preparing for its 2-7-3-4-20 session. Representatives adjusted translation devices, reviewed agenda items, and engaged in the usual pre-meeting socializing that transcended species boundaries. The Earth seat, as always, remained untouched. "The tale I'm about to share with you has become legend," Vemtkal continued, his voice dropping to a reverent whisper. "Some call it the Day of Awakening, others the Humbling. Official Senate records simply refer to it as the Earth Incident. But I was there, younglings. I witnessed it firsthand." The historian's eyes shifted to gaze at the empty seat, a look that might be described as a mixture of respect and lingering fear. Before that day, the absence of Earth's representative was merely considered a bureaucratic oversight. The humans, we assumed, were simply not worth the trouble of formal inclusion. But the true reason that seat remained vacant, Vemtkal's exoskeleton shuddered, well, by the end of that day, every species in the galaxy understood why Earth's seat had always been empty. The crisis began, as most galactic emergencies do, with the Zurlian Empire making outrageous demands. The war-mongering arthropods had been expanding their territory at an alarming rate, crushing or assimilating 17 different civilizations in the previous decade alone. "The Zalians have set their compound eyes on the Sol system," announced High Chancellor Omrix, the gelatinous leader of the Senate. His translucent body pulsed with stress chromophores. "Their advance fleet will reach that sector within 2 galactic weeks." The Senate erupted in a cacophony of concerned voices, tentacles and appendages gesticulating in distress. "But Sol is a protected development zone," protested the Rigilian ambassador, her bioluminescent skin flashing in patterns of outrage. "The Zalians no longer recognize our developmental protection treaties," replied Omrix, his voice carrying the artificial tone of the universal translator. "They claim the resources of the system are too valuable to leave in the hands of pre-FTL species." "What species even lives there?" gurgled a representative from the methane-breathing European collective. A holographic display activated at the center of the chamber, showing a blue-green planet, third from an unremarkable yellow star. "Earth," Omrix announced, "home to a bipedal species called humans." The Senate chamber fell unnaturally quiet. Even the most talkative delegates seemed suddenly reluctant to speak. "We all know the rumors," finally said Ambassador Krill of the Pleiades Concordat, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "That system is peculiar." "Rumors are not facts," countered Omrix. "Our contact with Earth has been minimal by design. We designated their system as a development preserve 3,000 years ago when our scouts detected primitive but promising tool use. Standard protocol, observed from a distance, allow natural evolution. But there have been incidents," whispered another delegate, not quite meeting any of the eyes, stalks, or sensory organs around them. Everyone knew what the delegate meant. The mysterious disappearances of research vessels that ventured too close to Earth's orbit, the garbled transmissions from observation posts, claiming impossible technological jumps. The unsettling stories of abducted researchers returning with memories of probing and other indignities. Regardless of the rumors, Omrix's gelatinous form rippled with finality. The Senate has a responsibility. We must inform the humans of the Zurlian threat and offer evacuation before their planet becomes a casualty of imperial expansion. And so it was decided. A first contact delegation would be assembled, volunteers only, to officially welcome Earth into galactic society and warn them of their imminent doom. Not surprisingly, volunteers were scarce. 3 days later, the diplomatic vessel _peaceful overture entered the Sol system with the kind of caution usually reserved for approaching a supernova. Captain Lozwan, a veteran of numerous first contacts, couldn't shake a creeping sense of dread. "Anything on sensors?" she asked her science officer. "Just primitive satellites, some space debris, and a single space station," replied Jigsaw, adjusting his sensory apparatus. "Nothing that suggests advanced defensive capabilities." "That's unexpected," muttered Lozwen. "Initiate contact protocol." The _peaceful overture transmitted the standard greeting package, mathematical sequences establishing intelligence followed by simplified explanations of their peaceful intent, and waited for a response. They had to wait precisely 4.3 seconds. "Captain," called the communications officer, antennae twitching in surprise. "We're receiving a response, in perfect galactic standard." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a human female with dark skin and curly hair styled in an elaborate arrangement. She wore what appeared to be formal attire by human standards. "Greetings, representatives of the Galactic Senate," the human said with a smile that seemed simultaneously welcoming and predatory. "We've been expecting you. My name is Blackwood, Earth's ambassador to the stars. We'd invite you down for tea, but we suspect you're in a bit of a hurry, given the Zurlian battle fleet approaching from the Oort cloud." "Don't worry, we're handling it." Captain Losforth's nearly stopped simultaneously. "You know about the Zurlians?" The human's smile widened. "Oh, honey, we know about everyone." The arrival of Ambassador Blackwood to the Senate chamber 3 days later caused more commotion than a supernova in a densely populated system. The human strode into the hall with the confidence of someone who had been there 1,000 times before, not bothering to gawk at the impressive architecture or the diverse array of alien species that had most first-time visitors frozen in awe. "Sorry I'm late," she announced, her voice carrying effortlessly across the chamber without technological assistance. "Intergalactic traffic was a nightmare." The joke fell flat, partly because most species present didn't understand the concept of traffic jams, and partly because they were too busy processing the shock of a human appearing in their midst without the expected wide-eyed wonder of a species making first contact. Chancellor Ombrix recovered first. "Ambassador Blackwood, welcome to the Galactic Senate. We are surprised by your familiarity with our customs and language." Eloin shrugged, a distinctly human gesture that caused several xenobiologists in attendance to frantically take notes. "We've had time to prepare. Your observation satellites aren't nearly as stealthy as you think they are." She approached the empty seat that had been designated for Earth centuries ago, running her hand along its arm with a knowing smile. "I see you've been keeping our spot warm." "That seat has been reserved for Earth for over 12 centuries, explained Omrix, his gelatinous form pulsing with confusion. "Though we did not expect it to be claimed under these circumstances." "Or at all," muttered a delegate from the Sirius hegemony, not quite quietly enough. Eloin's eyes, a striking green that seemed unusually reflective under the chamber lights, snapped to the delegate. "We heard that, by the way. Human hearing is quite good. Another evolutionary trait your scientists may want to update in their hilariously inaccurate databases." The Syrian delegates sank lower in their seat. "Ambassador," Omkrest continued, trying to steer the conversation back to diplomatic waters, "we've brought you here because your world faces an imminent threat. The Zurlian Empire has set course for your system with conquest in mind. We offer our assistance in evacuating your leadership and as many civilians as can be accommodated before their arrival." A ripple of surprised murmurs ran through the chamber. This was unusually generous for the typically non-interventionist Senate. Eloine took her seat, crossing her legs in a casual manner that nonetheless commanded attention. "That's very kind of you, Chancellor, but unnecessary. Earth can handle the Zurlians." The chamber erupted in incredulous exclamations. A pre-FTL civilization facing down the most aggressive military force in the galaxy? It was absurd. "Ambassador Blackwood," said the Andromedan representative, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns that signaled diplomatic concern. "Perhaps you don't understand the severity of the situation. The Zurlian Empire possesses technology far beyond what Earth could have developed in isolation. Their armada includes planet-cracking weapons. And you believe we've been developing in isolation?" Eloine raised an eyebrow, a gesture that the Senate's AI translated for non-human species as expressing skepticism with a hint of amusement. Before anyone could respond to this cryptic statement, the main doors to the chamber slid open again. A Zurlian War-Diplomat entered, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the lights, mandibles clicking in what those familiar with Zurlian expressions recognized as smugness. "I see we're just in time for the discussion of the Sol System's fate," the Zurlian announced. "How convenient." War-Diplomat Kzar of the Zurlian Empire stomped forward on his four hind legs, using his mid-limbs to gesticulate threateningly, while his upper appendages remained folded in the traditional posture of Zurlian superiority. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he addressed the Senate. "The eternal empire of Zurlia has claimed the Sol System by right of superior force," he announced, voice modulator translating his clicks and pheromone bursts into galactic standard. "We recognize no authority of this Senate to interfere with our expansion." Chancellor Omrix's gelatinous form rippled with diplomatic distress. "War-Diplomat Kezkar, this body has recognized Sol as a protected development zone for millennia. Your empire signed these same protection treaties." "Treaties change," chittered Keshka dismissively. "Empires evolve. The resources of Sol are too valuable to leave in the hands of primitive bipeds who haven't even mastered efficient fusion power." Several delegates glanced nervously at Ambassador Blackwood, expecting either terror or confusion from the human. Instead, Eloine appeared to be smiling. No, she was trying to suppress laughter. "Is something amusing you, Earth creature?" Kezkar's mandibles clicked in the pattern denoting irritation. Eloine composed herself with visible effort. "I'm sorry, it's just..." She gestured vaguely at the Zurlian's posture. "You remind me of a character from an old Earth entertainment program, called himself the Lord of Dance or something similarly grandiose, had the same strutting quality." The Senate chamber went deathly silent. No one insulted a Zurlian war-diplomat. It was diplomatic suicide, often followed by actual suicide, when their battle fleets arrived. Kezkatar's compound eyes flashed with bioluminescent rage. "You dare mock a representative of the Eternal Empire. Your species will be the first to be processed when our armada arrives. The lucky ones will serve in our protein reclamation facilities." "About that armada," Eloine said, casually examining her fingernails, "the one approaching our system, I'm afraid they've run into some technical difficulties." As if on cue, the central holographic display of the Senate activated. It showed real-time footage of the Zurlian advance fleet, 50 warships of varying sizes, all bristling with weapon systems, suddenly surrounded by small, previously undetected craft of distinctly human design. The Senate watched in collective shock as the human vessels, which should have been hopelessly outmatched, executed a series of maneuvers that defied conventional physics. They moved with impossible precision, appearing to shift position faster than light should allow without the telltale energy signatures of known FTL systems. "What you're witnessing," Eloine explained to the stunned assembly, "is our 7th Fleet engaging in standard containment protocol. Nothing special, really, just a friendly warning." On the display, the human ships released what appeared to be thousands of tiny objects toward the Zurlian vessels. Whatever these objects were, they passed straight through the Zurlians' energy shields as if they weren't there. Impossible, sputtered Kazkar, mandibles clicking frantically. No technology can penetrate our phase-shifted deflectors. Quantum entanglement doesn't care much about phase shifting, Elwin replied with a shrug. Those are what we call diplomatic persuaders. Non-lethal devices that are currently disabling your ship's propulsion and weapon systems, while leaving life support intact. Your crews will be perfectly comfortable while drifting back to Zurlian space. The trip might take a few decades at sublight speeds, but I understand your species enjoys long journeys. The Senate erupted in chaos. Species with vocal communication shouted questions and exclamations. Those communicating through light patterns, pheromones, or telepathy created their own commotion, overwhelming the chamber's translation systems. Silence! Chancellor Omric's amplified voice finally restored order. He turned all 7 eye stalks toward the human ambassador. Ambassador Blackwood, you claim your civilization possesses technology far beyond what our surveys indicated. You appear to have defeated a Zurlian battle group with ease, yet you have maintained the appearance of a pre-FTL civilization. Explain yourself. Eloan stood, smoothing her formal attire. Chancellor, distinguished delegates, and you, Kezkatar, though distinguished might be stretching it, perhaps it's time humanity formally introduced itself to the galactic community. Humanity, began Eloan, her voice carrying effortlessly through the now silent chamber, has never been the primitive species you believed us to be. We've been watching you, all of you, for quite some time. She activated a small device on her wrist, and the central holographic display shifted to show Earth from orbit. As the Senate watched, the image zoomed in on what appeared to be ordinary cities and landscapes. Then, with a gesture from Eloan, the image changed. Holographic overlays revealed vast underground complexes, oceanic installations, and orbital structures that had somehow remained undetected by the Senate's most sophisticated scanning technology. We achieved faster-than-light travel approximately 300 of our years ago, Eloan continued. Shortly after, we detected your observation satellites. Rather than announcing ourselves, we decided to study you first. Call it an abundance of caution. 300 years? The Arcturan representative's exoskeleton rattled with disbelief. That's impossible. Your kind was still burning fossil fuels and fighting primitive wars when our last comprehensive survey was conducted. Excellent camouflage, isn't it? Eloan smiled. We call it the Nothing to See Here protocol. We've maintained a carefully curated appearance of a developing civilization while our actual technology advanced in other directions. The display shifted again, showing human vessels of elegant design moving through what appeared to be tunnels in space-time itself, nothing like the brute force hyperdrive technology used by the Senate species. You see, while you were perfecting ways to punch through space, we were learning how to fold it, Eloan explained. While you were developing bigger guns, we were creating weapons that don't need to destroy matter to neutralize threats. Different evolutionary paths, different solutions. But why the deception? Demanded Chancellor Omrix. Why maintain this elaborate charade for centuries? Eloan's expression grew more serious. History, Chancellor. Earth history is filled with cautionary tales of what happens when technologically mismatched civilizations meet. It rarely ends well for the less advanced culture. She paused, letting that sink in. We needed to understand the galaxy's political landscape before revealing ourselves, and what we observed was concerning. Concerning? Echoed a delegate from the Pleiades Concordat. 3,042 interspecies conflicts in the past millennium alone, 17 genocides, 42 planetary sterilizations. Eloan listed these atrocities with clinical precision, the strong consistently dominating the weak. Species like the Zurlians allowed to expand unchecked because the Senate values non-intervention over justice. War-Diplomat Castar's mandibles clicked in furious protest, but Eloan continued without acknowledging him. We decided that when we finally took our seat in this Senate, we would do so from a position where we could not be bullied, exploited, or patronized. Today seemed as good a day as any. The implications settled over the assembly like a heavy fog. Humanity had been watching, judging, and preparing, all while the galaxy's powers thought they were observing a primitive species taking its first steps toward the stars. "There's something else you should know," Elwin added, almost as an afterthought. "Those observation satellites you placed in our system, we've been feeding them carefully curated data for centuries, like allowing your anthropologist to watch only our reality entertainment programs and thinking they were documentaries." A ripple of uncomfortable realization spread through the chamber as various species recalled their authoritative research on human behavior. "Which means," concluded Elwin with a smile that somehow managed to be both diplomatic and predatory, "you don't actually know what humans are capable of. Today's demonstration was just the tip of the proverbial iceberg." War-Diplomat Ketstar had finally had enough. His chitinous exoskeleton trembled with rage, and the pheromones he emitted were so potent that several nearby delegates hastily activated breathing filters. "These are lies and illusions," he chittered furiously. "No species goes from combustion engines to outmaneuvering our finest warships in mere centuries. The Zurlian Empire will not be intimidated by holograms and empty boasts." Elwin sighed with theatrical weariness. "I figured we'd get this reaction. Ketstar, would you like to contact your fleet? Go ahead, try to reach them." The Zurlian war-diplomat activated his communication device, mandibles working confidently. His compound eyes widened when, instead of his fleet commander, he saw only a human face on the small projection, a different human, wearing what appeared to be casual attire and eating something from a bowl. "Oh, hey," said the human, looking surprised. "This the Senate call. Hang on." He set aside his bowl and adjusted something off-screen. "Admiral Chen here, sorry about the casual introduction, was just having some cereal. Didn't expect the call for another 20 minutes, according to Ambassador Blackwood's schedule." "Where is Fleet Commander Votskil?" demanded Kashkar. "What have you done with my ships?" "Your commander's fine," replied Admiral Chen, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Grumpy, but fine, currently enjoying our hospitality aboard the HFY Diplomacy." He gestured, and the view widened to show a detained Zurlian officer, looking considerably less imposing without his ceremonial battle armor. Ketstar turned all four of his eye stalks toward Elwin. "This is an act of war." "Technically," Elwin countered, "your fleet entering our sovereign territory with declared hostile intent was the act of war. We merely responded with proportional force. And unlike your empire's usual tactics, we didn't vaporize a single Zurlian in the process." The Senate chamber had become so silent that species with enhanced hearing could detect the subtle humming of the environmental systems. Every delegate was processing the implications of what they were witnessing. If humans could neutralize a Zurlian battle group without casualties, something no other known civilization could accomplish, what else were they capable of? Chancellor Omrix finally broke the silence. "Ambassador Blackwood, while this demonstration is impressive, I must point out that military action against another civilization within Senate space is a violation of our most fundamental principles." "Is it?" Elwin raised an eyebrow. "According to Section 7, Paragraph 12 of the Mutual Defense Charter, which we've studied extensively despite not being signatories, any civilization has the right to defend itself against unprovoked aggression. We simply exercise that right with unusual restraint." Before Omrix could respond, the central display changed again. It now showed the Zurlian ships being systematically enveloped in what appeared to be enormous bubbles of distorted space-time. "Since War-Diplomat Ketstar seems unconvinced," Elwin explained, "Admiral Chen is now demonstrating our standard containment procedure. Those are localized space-time isolation fields. The Zurlian vessels are being placed in what you might call time out, a bubble where time passes much more slowly relative to the outside universe." That's impossible," stammered the Regalian physicist who served as their Senate representative. "The energy requirements alone would exceed the output of multiple stars." "Only if you're trying to brute force it," Elwin replied with a dismissive wave. "We've found more elegant solutions. The point is, the Zurlian Empire has two choices: recall all forces from the borders of human space and sign a non-aggression treaty, or have their entire battle fleet returned to them one ship at a time over the next few thousand years. War-Diplomat Kazkar's mandibles clicked in what the translation system identified as restrained panic. You can't seriously expect the Eternal Empire to... I think we've established that the Zurlian Empire is no longer negotiating from a position of strength, interrupted Elowin. Admiral Chen, please prepare to send Commander Votskil back to his government with our terms, and maybe give him some of that cereal. He looks hungry. The display went dark, leaving the Senate in stunned silence once more. Elowin turned to face the assembly, her expression now solemn. Distinguished delegates, humanity comes to the Galactic Senate not as supplicants nor as conquerors, but as equals. We've kept our seat empty until we could be certain of that status. Today, that changes. And with those words, she sat down in Earth's long vacant chair, crossing her legs casually as if she'd been doing it for years. The following 12 hours of Senate deliberation were among the most chaotic in the chamber's long history. Species that had been traditional rivals found themselves in rare agreement about the potential threat or opportunity that humanity represented. Trade alliances frantically calculated the economic implications. Military coalitions reassessed strategic doctrines that had remained unchanged for millennia. Through it all, Ambassador Elowin Blackwood sat calmly in Earth's seat, occasionally tapping at her wrist device, which the Senate's more observant security analysts now suspected was far more than the simple communication tool it appeared to be. When the chamber finally quieted, Chancellor Omrix addressed the human ambassador with a new tone, one that carried unmistakable notes of respect and perhaps a hint of fear. The Senate has reached a consensus, the gelatinous being announced. Earth will be formally recognized as a sovereign power with all rights and responsibilities thereof. The protective designation around your system will be lifted at your discretion. A pause. We would also like to formally request technological exchange programs, particularly in the areas of your unique approach to space-time manipulation and non-destructive conflict resolution. Elowin smiled. We anticipated this request, Chancellor. Humanity is prepared to share certain technologies, particularly those related to sustainable energy production, medical advancements, and environmental restoration. Our more sensitive innovations will remain proprietary for the time being. And the Zurlian situation, prompted Omrix. Admiral Chen informs me that Commander Votskil has transmitted our terms to the Zurlian High Command. They've agreed with what I'm told was unprecedented haste. Elowin glanced at War-Diplomat Kazkatar, who had spent the last several hours in rigid, mortified silence. It seems the Empire values its fleet more than its pride. A wise choice. The Andromedan representative's crystalline form shimmered with what her species recognized as deep curiosity. Ambassador Blackwood, many of us are still struggling to understand why humanity maintained this deception for so long. The resources of the galactic community could have accelerated your development even further. Or stunted it, countered Elowin. Innovation often emerges from necessity. When you're alone in the dark, you learn to create your own light. She stood, addressing the entire chamber. Humanity chose isolation because history taught us that true respect isn't granted, it's earned. We watched how this Senate treated developing worlds, how the strong dictated terms to the weak under the guise of guidance and protection. Her gaze swept the chamber, meeting the eyes, optical sensors, and various sensory apparatuses of the delegates. We wanted to join the galactic community on our terms, not yours. That empty seat wasn't just waiting for us to be ready for the galaxy. It was waiting for the galaxy to be ready for us. As her words settled over the assembly, an unexpected sound emerged, applause. It began with the Tau Ceti delegation and spread gradually until representatives from dozens of species were expressing approval in their various cultural ways. Light displays, pheromone releases, subsonic rumbles, and more. Even Chancellor Omrix's gelatinous form pulsed in the pattern denoting respect. Perhaps, Ambassador Blackwood, it is we who have learned something important today. Elowin's smile softened into something more genuine. That was rather the point, Chancellor. And that, my young friends, concluded historian Vemtkul to his wide-eyed audience of diplomatic attachés, is why Earth's seat remained empty for so long. Not because humans weren't ready for the Senate, but because they were ensuring the Senate would be ready for them. The observation deck overlooking the chamber had long since emptied of other visitors, leaving only the ancient Arcturan and his students to watch as the day's session concluded below. Ambassador Blackwood, the fifth human to hold the position since that historic day, was engaged in animated conversation with representatives from 3 different star systems. "Is it true they could have conquered the galaxy instead of joining the Senate?" asked Tazik, her feathers slightly ruffled with excitement. "Perhaps." Vemtel's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Human military technology certainly surpassed anything we had at the time, but conquest was never their goal. "Then what was?" inquired another student. "Recognition." The historian's 7 eyes blinked in sequence. "Humans have a saying I've always found illuminating. Better to be absent and miss the party than to attend and be treated as a servant." Below, the Senate chamber was beginning to empty, delegates filing out through the grand archways. Ambassador Blackwood remained, now alone in Earth's once empty seat, reviewing documents on a device that still appeared deceptively simple. "There's one detail I always found most telling," Vemtkul added, his voice dropping to ensure only his students could hear. "Years later, when I had the privilege of speaking privately with Elowyn Blackwood, I asked her why humanity had finally chosen that particular moment to reveal themselves." The students leaned in eagerly. She laughed, that distinctive human vocalization, and told me, to be honest, we were getting bored. "There's only so many times you can pretend to be amazed by your own technological breakthroughs for the benefit of hidden cameras. Besides, our betting pool for how long until they figure it out had been running for decades, and someone needed to collect their winnings." The young diplomats exchanged looks of surprise and amusement. "The most powerful lesson I learned that day," Vemtkul concluded, his exoskeleton creaking as he rose to his full height, "is that empty seats sometimes contain the loudest warnings." The Senate learned to question what they thought they knew, to reconsider their assumptions about developing species, and, perhaps most importantly, to approach the unknown with humility rather than condescension. He gestured toward Earth's now occupied seat. "Remember this when you encounter new civilizations in your diplomatic careers. The quietest species may simply be watching, learning, and waiting for the right moment to speak. And when they do finally speak," the ancient historian's eyes twinkled with humor, "it's generally in your best interest to listen." As if sensing their attention, Ambassador Blackwood glanced up toward the observation deck and offered a knowing smile and a wave that made Vemtkul wonder, not for the first time, just how good human sensory perception really was. "Last question, historian," ventured the boldest of his students. "Do you think there are other species out there right now maintaining their own empty seats until they're ready to reveal themselves?" Vemtkul clicked his mandibles in the Arcturan expression of wry amusement. "My dear child, since the Earth incident, that question keeps many a Senate security advisor awake during their designated rest cycles, and that, perhaps, is exactly as the humans intended."